On July 2, 1937, a twin-engined Lockheed Electra hummed steadily alone above a vast, featureless expanse of the Pacific Ocean. At the controls was Amelia Earhart, the most celebrated female aviator on Earth, attempting to close the final miles of a grueling flight around the equator. Below her, stationed off tiny Howland Island, operators aboard the Coast Guard cutter Itasca strained to decipher a burst of static-laced radio traffic. Through the interference, Earhart delivered a precise navigational report. "We are on the line 157337. After that brief string of numbers, the frequency went dead. The sudden absence of the world's most famous pilot left a vacuum. The flight ended, but an obsession began that has lasted for nearly a century. Within hours, the U.S. Navy and Coast Guard launched a massive rescue operation. Dozens of ships and aircraft were deployed to scour the open ocean for any sign of floating debris. When weeks of searching yielded nothing, authorities settled on a simple conclusion. The plane had run out of fuel, crashed into the open water, and quickly sank. But behind closed doors, the Treasury Department was suppressing a messier reality. Earhart had been attempting to navigate with a direction finder she didn't know how to operate, requesting signals on high frequencies her hardware couldn't actually process. Officials buried these reports to protect the administration from political fallout. Meanwhile, her husband and promoter, George Putnam, aggressively crafted a narrative of a flawless pioneer who met a tragic, heroic end. This coordinated effort to polish her legacy sent the public chasing a Hollywood ending, and in the process diverted attention away from the far grimmer physical evidence. Because people wanted a definitive, intact answer, investigators have spent decades chasing phantoms. For years, rumors circulated that Earhart actually survived a crash landing, only to be taken prisoner by Japanese forces on the island of Saipan. The primary evidence for this was a blurry photograph, supposedly showing her in captivity. That is, until researchers proved the image was actually published in a travel book 2 years before she ever took off. Even in 2024, an underwater exploration company released a sonar image, claiming they had found the intact Electra resting at the bottom of the ocean, 100 miles off Howland Island. Months later, higher-resolution scans revealed it was nothing more than a coincidental, plane-shaped pile of rocks. The fixation on finding an unblemished airplane at the bottom of the sea often pulls attention away from the fragmented physical remains waiting right on the surface. In the days immediately following her disappearance, civilians across North America picked up dozens of distress calls from someone identifying themselves as Amelia Earhart. These listeners picked up radio harmonics bouncing off the ionosphere to land globally. To transmit, Earhart had to run the right engine, proving she was on solid land. Extending her final position, a line 157 to 337 degrees, across the map reveals a direct path to land. That navigational line slices perfectly through a tiny, uninhabited coral atoll known then as Gardner Island and today as Nikumaroro. The combination of verified radio logs and strict navigational geometry points directly away from a deep-water ditching and toward a successful, desperate landing on a remote reef. When Earhart arrived over Nikumaroro on the morning of July 2nd, the tide was low. The exposed coral reef would have looked flat and dry enough to serve as an emergency runway. By the time Navy search planes flew over the island a week later, it was high tide. The reef was buried under a violent surf, completely obscuring the silver aircraft from the air. Later expeditions turned their attention to the island's interior, scouring the dense brush for what the Navy's aerial search had missed. Deep in the brush, researchers uncovered the remains of a makeshift campsite. They found twisted wire, fragments of American cosmetic containers, and glass bottles carefully arranged in the remnants of a fire to boil and purify rainwater. Most chilling of all, colonial authorities in 1940 discovered a partial human skeleton near that exact campsite. Subsequent forensic analysis of the bone measurements strongly matched the physical profile of Amelia Earhart. The accumulation of this evidence suggests she did not perish in a sudden impact. Instead, she survived her final flight, living as a resourceful castaway and fighting the elements in complete isolation. As for the aircraft itself, the relentless pounding of the Pacific surf likely battered the aluminum airframe to pieces, slowly dragging the wreckage off the edge of the reef and scattering it into the deep ocean over decades. Yet, that fragmented reality competes against a deeply ingrained public fantasy. People desperately want to find a perfectly intact Lockheed Electra waiting in the dark. Today, modern ocean explorers mount massive expeditions, preparing to spend millions of dollars scanning the ocean floor at 6,000 meters to find a phantom. We are left to wonder if we keep searching the abyss simply because we refuse to accept the quiet, human tragedy of a pioneer who died alone in the sands of Nikumaroro.